Hello, and welcome to the second edition of the M&D Summit Series. My name is Mark Fagan, Moore Global Industry Leader of Manufacturing and Distribution and a partner at Citrin Cooperman in New York. I'm here today with Kai Reuning, a mechanical engineer and operations consultant with Moore Global in Johannesburg, and Brian Mahon and Peter Morley, digital transformation consultants for Moore Insight in the UK. The first two topics of our summit series focused on supply chain and labor disruptions, technology, and its ability to minimize disruptors comes up as a popular solution. So in this session, we're going to discuss artificial intelligence, how AI is and is not impacting the M&D industry, as well as explaining some facts and fiction about AI. One of the best pieces I've read about AI is a recently conducted survey by E&Y and Microsoft. It surveyed 88 Western European companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, including AstraZeneca, Bayer, Fiat Chrysler, Novartis, Volkswagen, and Volvo. And what was interesting was really the lack of AI implementation going on with these companies. Only 10% of those surveyed have formulated a distinct AI plan with clear objectives covering initiatives, responsibilities, and allocation of resources. In addition, only 12% have scaled AI company-wide, reporting significant internal and external value. And these companies that have achieved that, well, they've been doing this in the AI implementation for at least 5 years. The survey also reports that data and the integrity of data is considered the most important part of AI, but that AI is only part of the digital transformation that's critical and going on right now in the fourth industrial revolution. So, Brian, let's start with you and this image that appears in the survey. What are the components of AI and which are being used?
Thanks, Mark. So the slide that you're looking at the moment shows various components that make up aspects of AI. And these are at various degrees of maturity in the market. So at the bottom of the diagram, you can see language and speech. Now, this is a well-developed technology. It's on desktop devices now. It's in people's homes when you look at the use of the likes of Amazon Echo, Alexa, that all of us have encountered. There are other aspects here around chatbots, virtual agents, again, which are starting to appear more commonly in standard offerings from ERP solution providers. So again, these are becoming more commonly encountered in both consumer and B2B contexts. The business of natural language processing, biometrics for measuring fingerprints, facial recognition, and so on, are all precursors to collecting data points. So the language and image processing that they represent in those simple contexts that we see them in today all lead to data point collection capability down the line where we get into deep AI. So moving up the diagram, when you talk about intelligent operations, one of the key enablers here is really the Internet of Things, or IoT, and that's fundamental. And so there are possibilities with the Internet of Things to capture huge amounts more data points. And so what you're seeing is technology and equipment, including this, built in so that you have the capability to gather those data points, whatever you do about assessing and using the data. And so that might be sensors on manufacturing equipment. And the data you collect then starts to create the opportunity to not just have post-event processing of the information that they provide, but also to allow you to start to do predictive processing of information. For your typical M&D companies, this is an area that you could think to start investing in now, once you start to get your head around the sort of information that you need to capture. So for example, it could be used as a quality control measure. The big prize is really at the top of the diagram in AI and the machine learning aspects, where it gets into deep learning. Here, the deal is really around processing the large volumes of data that may be collected through your various systems, whether it's the actual production line, the logistics systems, ERP systems, and so on. And it's about bringing that information together. But fundamentally, the key is to use that intelligently. And sometimes the difficulty is actually being able to see the wood for the trees. So, what's really important here is making sense of that data so that you are really clear on the quality of the information that you're relying upon. And so, starting to think about the information that you need to extract from your organization across all of its functions, bringing that together to make intelligent insights into the sort of decisions you need to make within your organization's key. And so the buzzword, if you like, around getting your head around that is data cloud engineering. And it's about understanding what the information is and where it should live. And there are platforms to help you to bring those disparate data sources together, despite the fact that some may be more structured or unstructured than others. And so in an M&D business today, you might want to start thinking around putting those things in place and doing the groundwork for understanding that data.
Yes, Brian, that was really helpful. It's certainly a confusing topic. And again, as the survey said, it's only one part of the digital transformation. So let's talk about what middle market M&D companies need to pay attention to when it comes to their technology. How does a company determine where to start to look for incremental improvements? Kai, is there common low-hanging fruit that you help your clients improve when it comes to technology?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, our approach has always been to advise our clients to be pragmatic and to work through a number of key considerations. And some of them are going to seem quite intuitive, but nonetheless, it's good to work through them. Firstly, is can you link the AI project to top line and bottom line growth? You don't want just a fancy AI addition to your company. You want it to work for you to bring you profits. Secondly, keep in mind your overall business strategy and clearly define how AI fits in with it. Be true to yourself and what you're trying to achieve as an organization. Thirdly, be clear about the type and what problem you are wanting to solve. It should address a specific pain, be it an internal one or one of your customers. Is the problem clearly enough defined? Is the scope sufficiently condensed? And have you identified an ideal end state post the AI implementation? Fourth, and specifically for mid-sized firms, AI at its early stage in your organization, focus on AI that has already been mastered, such as prediction, automation, or classification. It'll cost you a lot of money to try and reinvent something new, and you may not see those results. Also key is to ensure that, as Brian has mentioned already, is do you have enough good quality data? AI needs to be fed with large volumes of relevant, good quality data, and making sure that your data is ready to be plugged into the AI system is absolutely key to the success of any AI project. Sixthly, and importantly, is are your employees geared up to make use of the AI? Do you have sufficient buy-in from management and from staff? AI is really meant to augment what your staff and what your organization is already doing. So buy-in is crucial to the success of the project. And lastly, start small. Test out your assumptions and gear up what works.
You know, Kai, the point about people and the talent is a huge one. And any type of technology change that's occurred in the past with my clients or they're going to occur in the future, it's been a real concern. Implementing technology changes in middle market M&D companies, it can be unforgiving. At least that's the perception of the CEOs and experience that I've seen. Implementation is mostly done by outside consultants over a long period of time, which results in expensive implementation. And even with the consultants doing it, there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done with the people inside the organization, the employees working with those consultants. So it's a huge distraction during the implementation period. In addition, and this sometimes is the lack of talent of the current workforce, the workforce is resistant to change. That often results in underutilized ERP system or a new system that's been so over customized to make it look like the old system that it doesn't actually have the or utilizes the new features of the technology they're buying. So it's it's expensive, it's risky, and sometimes you don't get the benefits of the technology. What can a company do? And Peter, have you seen this? And how do you combat that from happening?
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, what you describe is a symptom of a very, very wide problem. The disparity between people, the systems, moving through automation right the way through up to AI. There is a chasm between corporate ERP systems and AI at the moment, and automation in general. Many of the ERP systems and many of the consultants which implement them know the technology but don't necessarily know the business. So the key message for the corporate CEO is to actually understand their organization, understand their processes, and be the very best intelligent client they can be to actually get the best out of the systems. So this requires an holistic approach that covers the whole scope of the business. What we do in our work generally is we use a business process taxonomy, basically a map of business processes, and there's some public domain ones of those which we use from APQC, and it's called the Process Classification Framework, and that gives us a corporate list of all the processes an organisation operates, and they particularly are focused around manufacturing distribution in the core. And the key thing is to actually understand the whole scope of processes which you have, understand who owns those processes, and then to look at them and challenge them. And this challenge is absolutely fundamental to seeing the opportunities of where you can actually implement and create process improvements. When we actually look at the processes at individual process level, we have an acronym, SASOD, SASOD. Now, what that means, right above automation, actually is the word stop. If there's a process or process step that doesn't need to happen anymore, stop it. And that might sound trivial, but actually, very often process steps don't get fully addressed, particularly if you like what Mark's describing, previous systems thinking has been incorporated into the current system. Sometimes things just need to be stopped. Then actually challenge it, can we automate this step? What is it? Is it something to do with robotic process automation, just be automated keystrokes, or can something be intelligently interpreted? Some sort of recognition, optical character recognition, very, very important. But where is the automation advantages coming? If you can't automate it, push it upstream, get the people to self-serve themselves. That is a process improvement. If that's not an option, perhaps you can outsource it to somebody else to do if it's a commodity function. And then at the end of the list, carry on doing it as you're doing, do it yourself. But the virtue of this is by having a map of all your processes, by having a view of your total landscape, you can actually see the processes across the piece, not just your direct manufacturing processes, but also your sales, your distribution, your finance, your HR, your IT. You look at all your processes and you understand all the steps that are there, and you understand and pick out the areas, and particularly, as we were saying earlier, the low-hanging fruit to bring automation to the fore. So that is really where the analysis and the challenge comes about, is by actually having that complete picture.
Peter, that's really interesting, and talking about this technology changes with clients and others, and looking at what the literature is saying, the movement, whether it be to enhance technology or AI, which is the ultimate prize, there's different places you can look to do it. One of the most important that everyone's talking about is supply chain visibility. Understanding what's going on at your suppliers or your suppliers, even your suppliers' warehouse floor, all the way to getting it delivered to the customer. Now, Kai, when a company looks to figure out where to start, kind of again, where to start, sometimes the literature is talking about, well, you start somewhere safe, like back office, and really that's what Peter was talking about as well at the end, the back office automation, and maybe having bots do some things that are repetitive that you can free up some of your employees from doing those things. That's one area, and probably a safe area, and maybe some of that with financial reporting. Then there's the supply chain that I just talked about, and the supply chain when it is looking at visibility through your suppliers, and then that's very attractive. And what I've read is the last one, visibility into customers, is usually the one that maybe is last on the list, because now you're messing around with maybe your customers, and you don't want to disrupt your customers because they're the ones that are paying your invoices, and you don't want to lose a customer by a snafu as you're learning AI. So where do you see the best bang for the buck in your experience with grabbing into enhanced technology improvements?
A great example of how AI is currently being used in a supply chain is one that I came across at one of our clients recently, Mark, which is a large South African bottling company whose strategy it has been to grow their managed volume by opening local distribution partners and managing the stock levels of strategic wholesalers. So the bottler performed an analysis of their wholesale and distributor channel and saw that it wasn't growing. And it wasn't growing due to stock availability at their customers, at the wholesaler and at the distributor. What they did then was they offered to manage the inventory for them. And this proved highly successful. And they began adding more and more distributors and more strategic wholesalers. The net effect of this is that the bottler now needed to manage so many more storage locations. Prior to this project, they only had 7 large warehouses. The end state of this project was that they would end up with potentially over 700 new storage locations. The internal planning system just couldn't handle the additional complexity. They are now implementing an AI system to not only plan the replenishment cycle, but to also continuously improve it, to provide that feedback loop into the system when something doesn't go to plan, and to continually optimize their stock holding. This is something that a manual or automated system could never do. And this is something that is also extremely customer facing and will drive a lot of revenue growth for the bottler.
Kai, that's really interesting. And that reminds me of a story that was told to me by an IBM executive I was interviewing. He was part of the technology group at IBM. And he told the story where the CEO of IBM was talking with the CEO of Starbucks. And the Starbucks CEO was frustrated because Starbucks was having a lot of trouble efficiently deploying cups, hot cups for hot coffee, and then the cups for iced coffee to its retail operations in an efficient and timely manner. And they couldn't predict when customers were using the hot cups versus the cold cups. So then the CEO of IBM, who had recently purchased the Weather Channel, suggested that they do a study to see how outside temperature at the Starbucks locations correlated with the purchase of hot beverages versus cold beverages. And what that study resulted in, 65 degrees Fahrenheit was the optimal temperature when customers flipped from buying cold coffee to hot coffee. So utilizing that data, Starbucks was able to predict when and where the hot cups and the cold cups were going to be needed across the globe, depending on weather patterns. So that literally saved them millions of dollars for freight and the types of cups that were being sent to each of their locations. So, that's an AI example, and the one that you gave that really makes sense and is understandable, but it is all about the data and the quality of the data. So let's go around the horn before we close, and if there's any other points maybe that we missed. Brian, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So for me, there's a couple of takeaways for you guys. And so data quality for me is no longer nice to have. It's a need to have if you're going to engage in AI. You got to focus on the business value that will drive, and understand what the touch points to integrate the data sets are that will release that business value. And really to see your systems as a creator of data rather than just a store of data.
That's a really good point. You don't think about it that way. A creator of data. Right now the biggest struggle is trying to have the data be accurate and not inaccurate to give inaccurate results, but a creative data is really that's a smart way to think about it. How about you, Peter?
There's 2 points. Thank you, Mark. The biggest bang for the buck, really, in terms of spend within a manufacturing organization, really is in systems integration, and actually bringing in data from systems outside of your ERP into the core. So extending the reach of the information available to you and to your systems, and from which you can derive key information. And that key information is not just on business facts and basically things working themselves through the chain. It's also on behaviors. And you can then pick up different behaviors and the way things are actually happening in your organization. And trying to apply reporting logic over those behaviors will bring further insights to your business. So the 2 points are basically integrate the systems and use that information to actually understand how the business sociology and behavior is working.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we keep talking about integration, and I keep thinking that the current workforce struggles so much with integration and adaptability to change, and adaptability especially to technology change. I think as the generation of 50 and 60-year-olds, frankly, as what I'm in as well, as that generation and my generation retire, and we weren't used to living with technology, maybe these implementations become easier because the millennials and the Gen X's and Gen Z's and so forth, they're just used to technology and technology change. So it may be the workforce is going to be, frankly, more talented in the future to be able to do these type of things.
What I would say on that is actually you need both. You need the experienced business wisdom with the agility and the technological awareness of the younger generation. The younger generation can actually implement technologies, but it's the older ones who will criticize them and critique them. And it's that combination of the two which will give you the winning solution. You need to be able to work across the generations to get the best solution.
Kai, do you agree, or do you think that it's continued to be a struggle to have people change and adapt to change?
Absolutely, Mark. I think all of our clients are currently looking at implementing AI on some level or another, even if they're just asking the question, what could we potentially use AI for within our organization? So it's something that is continuously growing. It's something that is developing. There are new solutions being found daily within different sectors, and is certainly maturing. I guess going back to my opening point, be pragmatic about whatever solution you're going to implement. Make sure it will solve a problem for you and add to the bottom line.
And that's consistent with what I've been reading and hearing is AI is not the solution for everything. It should be thought of as a whole social system, an ecosystem of tools. Some Some of it can help, and some of it is maybe not a pragmatic solution. This has been a great discussion, and I think that as the technology, the Industrial Revolution 4.0 continues and our clients continue to need technology solutions for supply chain disruptions and understanding customer preferences, they're going to need to have the right talent in their organization and the right tools and systems to really predict and to keep competitive. So thanks very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.